I'm Joy, Joy Elamon. At the moment, I work with KILA. KILA is the Kerala Institute of Local Administration. That's why automatically I was supposed to talk about local governments in Kerala and in the times of flood. And how I plan to do this is actually initially I thought of having some thoughts and ideas for the resilient Kerala, and then the local governments. Of course, it's all on the basis of the experience of the local governments, but the second part is on the local governments itself, the experiences, and oh, that's too much. And then finally, what KILA is also doing, so that I end up like that. And I like this whole idea. And also just to remind ourselves, it's not reconstruction as it usually happens after a flood or a disaster. It's not reconstruction, it is new Kerala. And it's a new resilient Kerala. And I was also happy to be part of that previous session here. Nowhere else I think topics like culture would have come if it was just reconstruction. If it is only because it is new Kerala that it has come, and that's exactly what I wanted to say. We are not going from a clean slate. We have to start from where we were, and it is not reconstruction. Why I say it's not reconstruction? Because we are not going to build exactly what was there before. So we have to move from, and also on the other side, we are also not starting from a clean slate, because we have our stories, we have our experiences, we have our successes so far in various aspects of life, in the development sectors and others, and also in all other socio-economic fronts. So we need to move on from there. And of course, we also have this Mallu tendency about we are first in everything kind of feeling. We only have two things. One is 100% of Sampurna Sashra to all kinds of things. Everything is 100% or we are first. But we have our own failures, we have our own limitations. This is the time to learn from those and move on in all aspects of life. And then look at those yet to be achieved in all aspects of life. And this is not something new for us. When this new government came into power, this is exactly the premise on which the Navakerala plan of action or the Navakerala Karma Paddhati was started. We were trying to say that we need a new Kerala now. Build on from where we are, and 4 major missions are all built on those aspects. And then this so-called floods came. But when you are talking about a resilient Kerala and rebuilding Kerala or new Kerala or whatever it is, I have a fear. How the tendency is about, whenever we talk about this in any forum, the first thing or the entire discourse is on reconstruction kind of thing. We are waiting for a disaster. We are thinking about the next disaster to come. So all our planning is based on we are going to have floods, because the earlier floods happened in 13 something. After that 1924. So it almost took 94 years or 100, you can simply say. And so when will the next flood happen? And then if you say this 1300 to 1924, then the next probability is that it can happen even within next 6 months or so. So all our planning is based on we are going to face floods. And then we get the news that there is something happening on the Arabian Sea, and so the cyclones are going to come. So we need to start planning for the cyclones. So all our rebuilding is on the cyclones based. And then we are also told that Kerala is still prone to earthquake in many parts of the state. So we need to start thinking about the earthquakes. So it's almost like waiting for we also had this, waiting for a cough kind of thing for this thing. Chomavaran Kathirikkunna Kudumam. So waiting for the cough, something like that, awaiting for a disaster. So we need to plan. One is on the floods. Sometimes it's on the landslides. On the other side, when you look at it, it's a cyclone. Then on the other side, it is earthquake. and we have to start planning for all these things and waiting for a disaster, something like a deterrence plan. I think that should not be the case. It should be planning for a confident, optimistic, resilient Kerala. And that is how it should be. And forget about the floods, forget about the so-called disasters. Instead, talk about nature, talk about environment, and nature, environment, human beings, and all these things added together could be a big one or a large one. That is how I see. And to start with, we need to have a better and clear stock taking of what were our successes, what were our limitations, what were our failures, and what we are up to. And we also need to think about a new sort of development planning. It need not be the same way in which we need to go. We need to actually start thinking differently. And of course, we are also talking about Kerala being a decentralized planning state, whereas it is not. We need to actually come to the reality that it is multi-level planning. We have planning at the local level, we have planning at the district level, we have planning at the state level, and we are in a, nationally there is no plan. So it's okay. So at least nationally there is no plan. Plan is over. Except that now they have started planning at the village level. So after 4.5 years, the central government has accepted that planning is still required, and so they have gone back to all the villages and start talking about people's plan campaign in the villages all over the country. Anyway, that's a different thing. Anyway, we need to actually start thinking about a multi-level planning. And multi-level planning is not about islands of plans. It's about integration. It's about convergence. And at all the levels there has to be master plan, and that is where the role of district plan comes. And that's where the planning board had already started before the floods about the district plan, and this is the right time to actually reinforce that aspect of the district plan with the convergence and integration of all aspects of development planning. And in this context, we need to address the availability, access, authenticity, and validity of data. I heard in a previous session about data is available. I beg to differ, because data might be available. I will say that I have everything on my laptop, but I won't give you. Everywhere there is data, but I mean, at least for the local governments, you don't get the required data at a disaggregated, when panchayat disaggregated data for many of the aspects, and access is even the difficult part. Accessibility is the difficult part. It might be available, but you don't get it in the way in which it should be available at that level. I mean, there's no point giving a lot of figures and this thing. We need to get, at the local level, we need to get the right formulation of the data, and how it is presented is also important. That is the challenge we have. And the institutional mechanism, who is going to plan and do. And that's again where the local governments come into play. And we'll have to discuss that in the next session, next few minutes. Local self-governments, what is their role, and also about various other institutions. And then the role of, the importance of convergence. And of course, in this build-up for a new Kerala, technology will be important, and also the technical support required at all levels of planning. See, here our problem is that we have the data, but that is used separately. We have planning that is done separately. We have technology that is kept separately, and the technical support is nowhere found, though it is all available everywhere. And the resource mobilization again, I mean, we need to actually rethink about what is resource itself. So there are resources which need to be tapped and brought in, converged, integrated, and all kinds of things. So basically our point is that this is also the right time to start doing things differently in a new way. Whether it is planning, whether it is implementation, whether it is participation, all kinds of things, we need to start doing things differently now. And one of the issues is about the convergence and coordination. That's the exact, when I am talking about multi-level planning, we have many departments, we have many levels. As I said, local government, as Gram Panchayat is there, the block Panchayat is there, the district Panchayat is there, the municipalities, I mean, all kinds of things. And also all the departments are at various levels. We have sectors like anything. Even for any sector, there will be hundreds of agencies, not hundreds, at least a few agencies on the same thing. We do not know how many schemes and programs are there. funds are available in various places in various ways. There are the centrally sponsored schemes and the state sponsored schemes. Then various missions. Then at the moment of, or at this moment of this post-disaster situation, we have many external agencies coming in, whether it is an international NGO or others, and then it is routed through the NGOs, but finally everything happens at the local level, at your doorstep, and then there is a need for coordination, need for convergence, otherwise all this will get dispersed in different ways, See, for example, we are talking also about the climate change, because I heard that in the previous session also, about the action, the climate change, biodiversity and environment, and we have a state action plan on climate change. I am quite sure that most of us would not have even heard about such a plan for Kerala existing. And this needs to be re-looked into. See, it's actually, at this point, it is also important to have a look at what is the status of a state action on climate change. We have the biodiversity register at the panchayat level. There needs to be cleaning up and follow up. And then biodiversity conservation would be part of our planning and other things. And of course, our major issue would be, when I talked about nature, environment and the human beings, we need to also start really thinking about enforcing legal instruments at the local level on environment and others. This is what we learned during these floods. But I am now coming back to the main point of the experiences. See, we have the unsung heroes and heroines. See, I need to say like that. I am forced to say that simply because when we had all the discourses in media and others, we forgot the local governments, we forgot the panchayat elected representatives and officials. I can still say I have because I actually I'm collecting around, at least now I have around 60 of the first person reports, stories by panchayat presidents, Gram Panchayat presidents on what happened since the time of announcement of a so-called disaster moving in. And I was also trying to analyze how they did it. Of course, before all these things, none of them had any idea about managing a disaster. Nobody told them how to manage it, though we are supposed to have local disaster management plans and all. Nobody knew what it is all about. But then, because we have three, what I analyzed was that we have three sets of local governments here, panchayats here. One, the regulars. Every year they get some sort of flood and all, and they know. And this time also they had that flood. After that, after 1 week or 2 weeks, again the second round started, and that became more disastrous. Second group is, they were all into the red alert. They were all given the red alert, and so they had a little time, and they had some time to plan for the future. And there was a third group, they didn't even have that option of getting that red alert well in advance. It was not expected as it happened, though there was communication that you are in the red alert time and all, but nobody thought that it is going to be like this kind of thing. So this is how these three groups of panchayats are there. And for the first group, in the initial stage, every year they do it, they know how to manage it, they did it. But the second part, they are all into the camps and all, and then there was also coming back home and all kinds of things, and they were a little, and I would say, okay kind of thing. And then suddenly the second bout of floods come, and then they were caught unaware, and that actually created a lot of havoc in their families. But the second group and third group and all these three groups, it is actually somewhat, generally when I look at it, it's all on the 15th early morning, around 1 o'clock onwards, the Tahsildars or the office of the Tahsildars called them, and then they came out of the house. Most of these elected representatives and officers at the panchayat level, some with the mic and all or others, started calling all the families and all, and then started. And by the time they reached and they were about to come back, already they were in the water. And many of them came back to their houses, homes, I mean, in the real sense, only after the floods were over and even after the camps were closed. I mean, I can give the names. I mean, even when their houses were in floods, they were all working for the community, which were never acknowledged by any of our media, any of our people. If I had gone there, I would have got my picture somewhere on some news channel or somewhere. But none of these people were acknowledged for the kind of work they did. That's one thing. Second one is, even during this time, Panchayat as an entity worked. See, there was this communication among themselves, what to do and what not to do and all kinds of things. They managed it in that way. And all the relief measures, all the rescue measures were all done on the basis of the Panchayat, though officially it was supposed to be revenue village. So because this boundary under some sort of a institution or some sort of a government existing in that Panchayat, that was the basis in which all the activities were implemented. So this system and for the people, naturally it was the Panchayat president and the Panchayat members and the Panchayat officials who were the first resort to go to. And this is how it happened. And that was at the onset and during. And when the camps were on, literally all the camps, where they were formally assigned or not, all the camps were managed by the local panchayats, panchayat elected and officials as well as the officers. And there was also this coordination of various agencies and various activities, formally and informally being done by the panchayats. And panchayat actually becomes the nodal point where all this happens. And the camps, you know how it went on. See, it was actually not just the panchayat. I am talking about so many agencies coming together, especially from the state government side and the district administration. But at the local level, it was actually the panchayats and the panchayat representatives who did a really marvelous job of getting all these things together. And you can understand what could be the scenario in such a situation with this time. See, that also, I think when you discuss, especially sir, your talk, we need to actually discuss. Usually, all these camps are meant for poorer people. And this time also the same thing would have happened. Initially, that is why, and in fact, if you look at the whole trend, especially I belong to an area where this flooded area. So, none of the usual victims complained about not rescuing, because they all got the message, they were all shifted. Others of my status and my family's kind of people, they all said, no, we have a two-storied building, nothing is going to happen to us, and we have never been into a camp. And all the panic calls which came were all not from the poorer sections of the population. It was all from the so-called, and most of the calls came from Middle East and other places, asking all of you to rescue my relative who is in that house and this house and that thing. But then finally they were all rescued and brought into these camps, and the kind of tension it would have created was all avoided simply because of the local leadership available there. We ignore that actual fact, how the community has been mobilized, community has been brought together, all those kinds of things happened because of the local leadership there. That naturally happens to be the panchayat there. And when it's back to life and going back again, the same thing. All those cleaning activities, everything happened with under the leadership of the local panchayat, whether they were assigned or not. That's the thing. If you go by the NDMA, the Act and all kinds of things, panchayat is nowhere in the picture. And now, after the floods, again, it's a second round of floods. It's about floods of complaints. All the people approach the panchayat, elected representatives and officials simply because people consider the panchayat in the Kerala as their government people. They don't go to the village officer or they don't go to the collector, district collector. They actually go, in fact, even abuse the local panchayat people, where they are not at all responsible for what is going to happen after this. All those other measures are done through other machinery, but still, and then they actually take the side of the people and they go to the panchayat village office or collector and do it. So this is the kind of activities which have been, this is the, I mean, I would say the first person accounts of how it happened and even now how it is happening. So when we have all these discussions, they are already into rebuilding and redoing. Many examples are there where already they have started. Especially I was actually surprised. I was thinking about having all those, see, this is the time when all those mental problems and all will come and psychological support is required. And so we were also trying. But already many panchayats had started getting some support from some doctors, some psychologists, some psychiatrists and all kinds of things, and doing that kind of, especially for the children and women and other things. So these things are actually automatically started in Kerala, and that's why I said the unsung heroes and heroines, as I said. I mean, we forget that. Now what is new in Kerala? In the local governments, we have a new working group on environment, climate change, biodiversity and disaster. That's a new thing, because for those who do not know the Kerala system of planning, we have at every local government level, we have working groups on various thematic sectors like agriculture, education and all kinds of things. And this year, after the floods, we have for the new, there's a working group on environment, climate change, biodiversity and disaster. And this working group is not just to prepare projects for all these sectors, but also to influence other working groups on agriculture, on housing, on education and all. And this is exactly where we need to actually pitch in. When all of us are talking about all these things, this is the right time to actually go through this working group and influence the planning processes in all other working groups. And whatever we talk, finally it happens at the local level, and this is the right time to intervene and get things done through this. And then there's the possibility of local action plan on climate change. At Kila, we had already started doing such an exercise with panchayats of the hotspot districts. We have 4 hotspot districts. We have Wayanad, Palakkad, Alleppey and Idukki as the hotspot districts. And then we were actually, before the floods, we were actually having training programs on biodiversity and climate change for panchayats. And we were looking into preparation of local action plan on climate change and biodiversity and all. And now we need to take it forward in a little faster way. We have some methodology developed and all. And then for the coastal areas, it has to be coastal action plan. So why I'm saying all this separately is because it's not about a single remedy for the entire state. So coastal area has a different set of problems, and then in towns and cities, in areas like districts like Palakkad and all, it's about the temperature, and we need to have, last year we had heat strokes and other things, so we need to start talking about heat action plan and all at the local level. And then of course we need to have a disaster risk reduction and management plan at every level. I mean, state level we can have, district level we can have, but finally things happen at the local level and we need to have that. So here again the local, I'm again coming to the rebuilding part of it, where, as I said, we need to start thinking about how the local government should function, and then we need to actually start thinking about new ways of working by the local governments also. We have all the last 22 years have the panchayats have been doing a lot of things, but now they also should start thinking. And I think, CP, this is the right time for the local governments to, or the government to think about redefining the roles of local governments and the responsibilities of local governments. Over the last 22 years, we have found that in certain areas, local governments are doing marvelously well, and in certain areas, they are not able to do. Let us call the spade and see that this is the right time to say, no, this is not a local government area of activity. This has to be done by a particular agency or level. Whereas these are things which, even if somebody is doing now, no, this is the local government which should do. Exactly in kinds of the areas where, like the disaster management and other things, where local governments have a major role to play. So who should do at what level and where and when? And that is where, I mean, I know I don't want to create a controversy out of it, but there, all these experiences which I shared, I just want to highlight one point. We have the National Disaster Management Act and then the District Disaster Management Agency and all kinds of things. And finally, as I said, who does it. And in Kerala, especially because the local government system is so strong, we need to rethink on how the disaster management actions has to happen. And I would say it has to be the local governments, local self-governments, which have to actually deal with the disaster management plan and other things. At the moment, though in practice the local governments do, it is the revenue department which does it. It's fair enough up to the district level, where at the time of the disaster, in order to bring the uniformed and the non-uniformed persons together at that point of time, you need the district collector who can be the coordinating agency. That's correct. But that doesn't mean that the district collector is acting on behalf of the revenue, but it's part of the government. And when you go down in Kerala, we find that local governments, so the panchayats and the municipalities, are the only agency which has the control over all the development sectors at the moment. Village officer doesn't have. So village officer doesn't directly get the status of a district collector at the local level, whereas the local government, the panchayat, has the control over, because all these offices have been transferred to the local governments at that level. And practically, as I said, people refer to the panchayats as their government. Let us be open in that and start rethinking who should do what. And at the side of Kila, what we did, our experience is that, as I said, we had already started working before the floods on the climate change and biodiversity action. But during the floods, we actually came up with a long list of checklists by each actions, for each actions by the local government representatives and officials at various levels, checklist on what they should do or they should think while doing it, right from day one onwards and other things, which was found to be very useful. And then we also had the information videos on health and all other kinds of sanitation and all, with this thing for the, because and it was aired and telecast and all. And then we were able to bring some old book on dealing with disasters, how the panchayats can deal with those kinds of things. And I mean, it's interesting in Kerala. See, do you know what this is? Two volumes of books. It's all on various government orders, instructions, circulars and all during the times of flood for all the actors in this sector. And we could bring this out, which actually you don't find such things in a single place, and this becomes a problem for everyone. So this was also much accepted by people. And of course, we had because I forgot to bring, and it's over. And finally, we also had a book brought out by a very senior architect, Benny Kuriakos, on how to even identify the houses affected by floods and then how to deal with it, kind of thing. That was also on a very pictorial kind of thing. We could actually present it to them. And finally, I found this from the week. The fact that we have one of the best functioning LSJs in the country will be a great boon at this time, was told by Mr. P.H. Kurian, who was the Revenue Secretary, ACS, who said that. And then the local government secretary, Mr. T.K. Jose IAS, said, we could face this catastrophe this efficiently only because of the strength of our local political leadership. And this all comes from the bureaucrats. And they will continue to play a crucial role in rebuilding as well. And today, when I looked at CM's, Honorable Chief Minister's speech, what he says is, our local self-governments have also imbibed that spirit of taking forward our developmental initiatives and our rebuilding initiatives seamlessly and simultaneously. So even though I started saying that unsung heroes and heroines and not acknowledged for their deed, I find still people actually accept and acknowledge that, and we need to rebuild on the basis of the experiences from them. Thanks.